All right, today we're taking a look into a book that feels more relevant every single day. Deep Work by Cal Newport. This is basically a survival guide for anyone trying to do meaningful, focused work in a world that seems, well, designed to do the exact opposite. You know, to really get this, let's imagine someone we'll call Anna. Her day kicks off with just a flood of emails. By 10 a.m., she's already sat through a meeting, she's answered like a dozen instant messages, and she has, no joke, 15 different browser tabs open. At the end of the day, she's completely exhausted, right? Like she's just run a marathon. But then she looks at our main project, the one that really matters for her job, and she's barely made any progress. Does that sound at all familiar? Anna's situation is exactly what Cal Newport calls the modern Workday paradox. We've somehow built this work culture where looking busy, constantly firing off messages, jumping between meetings, always responding, we mistake that for being productive. But here's the thing, that constant churn of activity, it's often the very thing that stops us from doing the work that actually creates real value. So, to figure out the solution, we've got to define the problem. Newport splits all work into two main categories. Over here on the left, you've got deep work. This is the intense, focused, zero distraction stuff that really pushes your brain to its limits. This is where new ideas come from, what creates new value, and it's really hard for someone else to just jump in and do it. Then, on the right, you have shallow work. Think logistics, emails, most meetings. This stuff is often done while you're distracted, it doesn't really create much new value, and honestly, pretty much anyone could do it. Anna's day is just jam-packed with shallow work. But here's where it gets really interesting. Newport says this massive shift towards shallow work isn't a total disaster. Actually, it's a huge opportunity. For the handful of people who can actually resist that constant pull of distraction and learn how to work deeply, well, there's a massive reward waiting for them. And we're not just talking about feeling a little less stressed. This is a serious, strategic career advantage. Okay, so let's talk about that advantage. What does it actually look like? Well, a couple of MIT economists, Brynjolfsson and McAfee, say we're right in the middle of something they call a great restructuring. Basically, technology and automation are shaking up the job market so fast that it's creating some very clear winners and a lot of losers. And these economists, they've identified three specific groups who are going to do really, really well in this new economy. First, you've got the people who can work creatively with smart machines. Think of a data scientist like Nate Silver. Second, you have the superstars in any field, like the programmer David Heinemeier Hansson, people who are so good, companies all over the world want them. And third, well, you have the people with access to capital, the investors like John Doerr. So the crucial question, right, is how do you join one of those first two groups? You might not have the capital, but you can build the skills. Newport boils it down to two core abilities. First, you have to be able to master difficult things, and fast. And second, you have to be able to produce work at an elite level, both in quality and speed. And the one single skill that powers both of these? I think you know where this is going, deep work. And this ties directly into how our brains actually learn things. I mean, to get truly good at any complex skill, whether it's coding or playing an instrument or performing surgery, you need something a psychologist named K. Anders Ericsson calls deliberate practice. And guess what deliberate practice requires? You got it. Intense, unbroken focus. When you work deeply, you are literally engaging in the most efficient and effective form of learning that we know of. Okay, so if deep work is so powerful, if it's the secret weapon, why don't more people do it? Well, it's because our modern work environments are practically engineered to prevent it. They are, for all intents and purposes, worlds that are designed for distraction. Newport points to three main forces that are constantly pushing us toward the shallow end of the pool. First is the principle of least resistance. It just means that, hey, we tend to pick the easiest thing in front of us, like answering a quick email instead of tackling a really hard problem. Then there's busyness as a proxy for productivity. This is huge. In knowledge work, it's hard to measure output, so we just default to looking busy. And finally, there's what he calls the cult of the internet. This kind of blind faith that any new app or platform is automatically good, and we just have to use it without ever really questioning the cost to our focus. And a perfect real-world example of this is when Yahoo's then CEO, Marissa Mayer, banned remote work. The decision was apparently based on VPN logs showing that employees weren't signing in enough from home. The message this sent was crystal clear. Visible activity, just being online, was being treated as the same thing as productive work, whether it was or not. So, what's the real cost of all this shallow nonsense? Well, Tom Cochran, who is a CTO at Atlantic Media, he actually ran an experiment. He calculated the annual labor cost for his employees just processing their email. The final number he came up with was staggering, over $1 million. $1 million a year for his team to basically act like human network routers, which was definitely not their main job. Now, the economic argument for deep work is pretty compelling on its own, but the case for it goes way beyond just your paycheck. It gets into neuroscience, psychology, and even philosophy. Newport argues that a life that has a lot of deep work in it isn't just more successful, it's also a lot more meaningful. So let's start with the brain. From a neurological standpoint, when you focus really intensely on something, you're not just thinking, you are literally building a better brain. See, the act of concentrating on one skill builds up this fatty tissue called myelin around the neurons you're using. Myelin is like the insulation on an electrical wire. It lets that brain circuit fire faster and more cleanly. So to be great at something is literally to be well myelinated. Okay, now for the psychological side. Deep work is basically the doorway to what's known as flow. That's the term psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi came up with for that state where you're so completely absorbed in what you're doing that you lose all track of time. You're just in the zone. And his research proved pretty definitively that the more flow we experience in our lives, the happier and more satisfied we are. And finally, there's the philosophical case for it. Two philosophers, Hubert Dreyfus and Sean Kelly, they argue that in our modern secular world, a lot of us struggle to find a real sense of meaning. They suggest that craftsmanship offers a way forward. The job of a craftsman, they say, isn't to invent meaning out of thin air, but to develop the skill to see the meaning that's already there in the work. And this idea applies to any skilled work, whether it's with your hands or with your mind. Okay, so we get it. Deep work is critical. It's valuable. But how do you actually do it in a world that's constantly pulling you away? Well, Cal Newport doesn't just hand us a flimsy life raft and wish us luck. Oh no, he gives us a submarine. He lays out a practical 4-part playbook for completely re-engineering our work lives. It's a system designed to help us claw back our focus and, unlock what we're really capable of. These aren't just little tips and tricks. This is a full-on blueprint for a more productive and, honestly, a much more fulfilling life. All right, first up, rule number 1, work deeply. The main idea here is pretty simple but powerful. Deep work doesn't just happen because you want it to. It's not about just having more willpower. You have to intentionally build a structure for it, create routines and rituals that act like a fortress to protect your focus from all the chaos of the outside world. Now, Newport gets that we're all different, so there's no single right way to do this. He offers 4 different philosophies. You've got the monastic approach. This is for the hardcore purists who can basically shut out the world. Think of a researcher locked away in a lab. Then there's bimodal, where you split your time into big chunks. Maybe mornings are for your deep project, and afternoons are for all the meetings and emails. The rhythmic approach is all about making deep work a consistent daily habit. And finally, the journalistic philosophy is for people with crazy schedules, who have to be able to flip a switch and dive deep whenever a window of opportunity opens up. The rhythmic approach, it's perfectly captured by Jerry Seinfeld's famous method. He'd get a big wall calendar, and every single day that he wrote jokes, he'd draw a big red X. After a few days, you've got a chain. Your only job then, he said, is to not break that chain. It's not about writing the world's best joke every day. It's about the consistency, the momentum. It's so powerful. But what if you need something more dramatic? That's where the grand gesture comes in. J.K. Rowling was really struggling to finish the last Harry Potter book with all the distractions of home life. So what did she do? She made a seriously bold move. She checked into a suite at a 5-star hotel and basically didn't leave until the book was done. Now, this wasn't just about finding a quiet place. It was a huge psychological commitment. By investing that much money and making such a grand statement, she was signaling to her own brain, this is the most important thing right now, period. Okay, this next rule might sound a little weird, but stick with me because it's absolutely crucial. Embrace boredom. In our world today, we are completely allergic to being bored, right? The second we have a free moment, in line for coffee, waiting for a meeting, we reach for our phones. Newport argues that this constant need for stimulation is actually destroying our ability to do deep work. To really focus, we have to retrain our brains to be okay with, doing nothing. Just think about it. Every time you pull out your phone to kill a few minutes of boredom, you're training your brain to crave a constant drip of novelty. You're teaching it to be antsy and unfocused. So Newport's advice is simple, but it is not easy. Resist that urge. Every time you choose to just stand there to let your mind wander, you're doing a rep for your focus muscle. It's literally a workout for your brain. And the more you do it, the stronger your concentration gets when it really counts. And a key technique for this is something he calls productive meditation. So while you're doing something physical that doesn't require a lot of brain power, like walking or driving, instead of just zoning out or listening to a podcast, you consciously direct your focus onto a single professional problem. You think about it. You structure your thoughts. You look at the variables. You decide on the next steps. You're not only training your concentration, but you might actually solve a huge problem while you're at it. Okay, let's talk about the elephant in the room, social media. Newport's third rule, quit social media, is probably the one that makes people the most nervous. But before you panic, just hear me out. Newport is not some anti-technology hermit. He's not telling us to go back to the Stone Age. His argument is way more nuanced and, frankly, more powerful. It's not about hating technology. It's about being incredibly intentional with the tools we choose to use. He calls this the craftsman approach. So picture a master woodworker. Their workshop isn't overflowing with every single tool imaginable, right? No, they have a carefully chosen collection of high-quality tools that they know how to use perfectly. We should be treating our digital tools the same way. Instead of just asking, what's the harm in signing up for this new app? We should be asking, does this tool really, truly help me achieve my most important goals? And even if it does, is it the best way to do it? And if you're not sure which tools are actually valuable, Newport has a really simple experiment, the 30-day digital detox. For 1 month, just take a break from all the non-essential apps and social networks. And here's the key. Don't make some big public announcement about it, just quietly step away. Then, at the end of the month, you ask yourself 2 simple questions about each service. 1, was my life significantly worse without this? And 2, did anyone even notice I was gone? The answers for a lot of these things might really surprise you. And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Rule number 4, drain the shallows. Because look, even if you schedule your deep work perfectly and you train your focus, it's all for nothing if your entire day gets eaten alive by low-value, shallow tasks. This rule is all about being ruthless and getting that time back. This right here, this should be a massive wake-up call for all of us. The average person doing knowledge work spends a staggering 60% of their day on shallow work. That's the busy work, the emails, the pointless meetings, the logistical stuff that feels productive but doesn't actually create any new value. That means for every hour you spend on deep, meaningful work, you're spending an hour and a half on stuff that could probably be automated, delegated, or just plain eliminated. So how do you tell the difference between deep and shallow work? Newport has this great little test. Ask yourself, could a smart college grad be trained to do this task in a few months? If the answer is yes, it's probably shallow work. Deep work is the stuff that you have to do, the stuff that requires your unique skills and expertise, the work that's hard to replicate and creates real, lasting value. Go on, I challenge you. Take a look at your to-do list for tomorrow. How much of it is truly deep? Now, this next tip might sound a little intense, but trust me, it's a game changer. Schedule every single minute of your day. I know, that sounds incredibly rigid. But the point isn't to become a robot slave to your calendar. The point is to be intentional with your time. And here's the most important part. Your schedule is not set in stone. Life happens, right? Things will come up. When your schedule inevitably breaks, you just take a breath, open your planner, and make a new one for the rest of the day. It's about being the one who decides what to do next instead of letting your inbox decide for you. So there you have it, the 4 rules. You build routines to work deeply. You retrain your brain by embracing boredom. You become intentional with your tools by selectively quitting social media. And you reclaim your day by draining the shallows. You can see how they all work together, right? But the conclusion of the book is what really elevates this whole idea. Deep work isn't just about being more productive. It's about building a more meaningful and satisfying life. There's this fantastic book called All Things Shining by a couple of philosophers, and they talk about how to find meaning in our modern world. And this quote just nails it. They argue that meaning isn't something you just invent out of thin air. It's something you discover through deep, focused engagement with something real, like the way a craftsman engages with their materials. And that right there is the ultimate promise of deep work. It's not just about cranking out more reports or clearing your inbox. It's about turning your work, whatever it is, into a craft. Whether you're a coder, a writer, a marketer, an artist, you have this amazing opportunity to be a modern-day craftsman. By applying that intense focus, by really pushing your skills to the limit, you create a life of depth, of purpose, and of real, lasting satisfaction. So that really leaves just one big question for you to think about. that important project, that big idea, that skill you've always wanted to master. What could you really create? What could you truly build if you just gave yourself the space to truly focus? A look into deep work gives you the insight, but the full book gives you the breakthrough. If you're ready to master your own mind, the link is in the description. Share this with someone who is also building their best self. Then like and subscribe to keep gaining clarity. Choose to grow.